All right, I'm gonna let everyone in now.
Okay.
All right. Middle.
Well, good evening, everybody. Tonight we have what I've been calling a B movie musical. That letter is the generally accepted term for low budget. Low budget, not necessarily low quality. It's MGM's Give a Girl a Break from 1953, and we've got Marge and Gower Champion, Debbie Reynolds, Bob Fosse, Kurt Kasner, and Helen Wood. But as for quality, this is interesting to me. One of you told me last week that you fell asleep halfway through it. But somebody else told me that this was, I'm quoting here, a delightful little sleeper of a film. So we'll see what the group thinks. I can't wait for the survey. You know the instructions by heart for participating on camera or in the chat. So here we go. No co-host tonight, it's just me. So just me sticking to my guns about the fact that, quote, this is a little sleeper of a film. We'll see if you guys think it is. And as I said in the intro, there are a lot of little interesting tidbits about Give a Girl a Break, but something tells me we're not going to need an hour to uncover all of them. So I may be able to send you home, as it were, a little earlier than we usually do. Let's do the survey because I'm on the edge of my seat. Leandra, take it away.
All right, here we go. So the first question is, had you seen this film before? And the second is, did you enjoy the movie? And we're at 65% participation. They're coming in quickly. 70%, 75, 78. Also looks like people are hopping in as well. All right, we're pausing at 78. All right, I'm going to close it in a few seconds. 80%, 85%. Still coming in. Holding at 85. All right, I'll close it in 3, 2, 1. And sharing the results. And looks like we had you seen this film before? We had 12% who said yes, and 88% said no. Wow. And then, did you enjoy the movie? 53% said yes, I loved it, and 6% said no, it wasn't for me. And then 41% said it was okay.
Okay, yeah, that's about what I predicted, especially the 88% of you who had never seen this in your lives and probably will never see it again because it's just so off the beaten track. I told Leandra before we started that I was predicting a group of 5. And we got a very nice attendance here, so I'm pleased. And I'd like to start with director Stanley Donen, because here he is sort of flexing his muscles. This is only the second film musical that he directed all by himself, as opposed to serving as Gene Kelly's associate or assistant. Nobody really knows which one. That was an unusual professional relationship. But it was Kelly who brought Stanley Donen to Hollywood in the first place. They had worked together on Broadway in the early 1940s. And Donen was also a skilled choreographer, but it was directing that he really wanted to do. So what I'd like to ask all of you is, did you find any signs in Give a Girl a Break that Donen was getting warmed up to direct Seven Brides for Seven Brothers and Funny Face and lots of other stuff that is, you know, pretty famous? Did you see any signs here of a pretty talented young guy who was on his way up? It looks like Lynn Bartle did. So we're calling on you, Lynn Bartle.
Well, I mean, I love this movie. I've never seen it before.
Yep.
And I mean, both of it, we had so much fun this afternoon. And all the dancing. I mean, at first I thought, oh man, you know, when Debbie and Bob Fosse danced, you know, the first time I thought that's the best. And then I thought, oh, you know, when the big guys did the big dance, I mean, whoa, that even gets better. And I thought it was great.
Wow. I'm delighted.
But I think it was entertaining, Bill.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I watch a movie.
Yeah, entertaining. It's entertaining in a kind of modest way, right, Arthur?
Yeah, low key.
I see a hand from Bridget.
Yes.
Oh.
I would say I would agree with you, Bill.
Okay.
And the one scene that had some directorial showing in it was the scene with, I guess his name was Robert Anderson and Helen Wood.
Uh-huh.
That was a serious scene. It was probably the only chance in the movie for some, I mean, you had the scene with Debbie Reynolds and her mother, which was a throwaway, but the one with any dramatic substance to it was the Anderson Wood scene.
Yeah, but I mean, let's also talk about Donen as a director of musicals and musical sequences as opposed to dramatic stuff. I mean, I think that's where Donen shines here, is just the way this film moves, the way it looks, the musical texture that it's got. Do you guys agree with that, or am I off base?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. Actually, that is where I see most of his gift. There were some really interesting choices that were made with lighting that I really appreciated, with the way that shots were framed. Like that whole pole dance scene. I don't even know what to call that scene with the, you know, that was so cool. It was like a piece of 1950s linen, because they had those lights hanging down just
Guilty,
like
guilty.
Oh,
okay, good. 3 hours deliberation.
Wow, shouldn't have taken that long.
I think you're unmuted, Herb. There we go. Yeah, so it was visually very stunning to look at, and some of the angles that the shots were taken, I thought were very engaging. So there was a lot of creativity that was happening in the dance sequences that I really appreciated.
And Bridget, before you go, I want to put you on the spot, because in this film we have Marge and Gower Champion. And I know Arthur is a big fan of Marge Champion. The two of them really started out in clubs and then made their way into films, specifically at MGM. If you saw the Showboat film from 1950 or 51, they're standouts in that film. But Bridget, I want to ask you what you noticed about them as a dance team, because they were just literally joined at the hip and developed their own style over a period of years that I think was quite remarkable. But since I don't know anything about dance and you do, tell us what's remarkable about them.
Actually, you know, you guys may hate me for this, but I enjoyed their dancing. It was great, but it didn't really stand out to me in the same way that Bob Fosse's dancing did. And as much as I don't care for him as like his reputation as a person and the way he treated other people and all that other stuff, I just couldn't look away. So he was the one who really, I just couldn't look away from him. So it was his dancing that really did it for me. I think that his dancing was so extra in comparison to everybody else's. It just drew my eye.
Uh-huh. Well, let me ask you the question in maybe another way, and then Arthur, you should comment on this because you know their work so well. I wonder if there's a generational gap here in terms of how we would think about their work together, Marge and Gower, because there's a kind of elegance about their dancing that, in a sense, they were the last of the line of that kind of elegance. Am I on the right track there, Arthur? Do you think?
Oh, yes. I agree. They were gorgeous. I was stunned by how beautifully they danced together. And what I was struck with when Bridget was talking, she talked about Fosse. She didn't talk about Fosse dancing with anyone. Okay, so he was not Fosse dancing with Debbie Reynolds, although that's been in the chat. It was Marge and Gower. Marge and Gower were beautifully. I compared them in my email to you, Bill, as the Lunt and Fontaine of dance. They were exquisite. Every move that they made that had to be together was together, even though they were completely different sizes physically. It was beautiful. When you compare that with, at least for me, with Gower Champion and Debbie Reynolds at the end, I thought that was an absolute mess. I was saying to him, I mean, she had her arms up, he had his arms on the side. That told me two things. One was, where's Gene Kelly now abusing Debbie Reynolds and causing her to bleed in the feet? That's what we needed in order to make it work. And the other is, and I've seen this in Shakespeare, in Much Ado, if you get a married couple together, the union rules on how much rehearsal you put in go by the, are thrown out, because you can rehearse at night. And that's what London Fontaine did. And I believe that extraordinary merger between Marge and Gower that created such elegance, as you put it, Bill, could only have happened through long hours and because they were a married couple and could rehearse as long as they wanted. So that's my response.
Arthur, I so agree with you. That's why I called them the big guys. I mean, they were the big guys on the floor.
So I wonder, Bridget, if there is a generational sort of gap here, because, I don't know when elegance disappeared from musical theater dancing, but pretty soon after Marge and Gower, at least in musical films. Maybe somebody can correct me there, but I can't think of anybody like Marge and Gower who followed them. They really created something that was part of a tradition. I mean, my Lord, just look at Fred and Ginger. But in a sense, they were the end of the tradition. And you wonder what was happening in American society that may have nudged that in the direction that it went. Carol Pred tells us in the chat, I didn't know this, that they had a TV show. Did not know that. And I bet it was the same sort of period, early to
It was only 1 year. I looked it up because I remembered watching it when I was like 5 or 6.
Oh, so, and what year was it? Do you know?
1957.
57. Okay, that was just about the end of their film career. Wow. And Sandra Kramer echoes Arthur and me. Yes, I love Marge and Gower, and Lynn, echoing Lynn as well. Yeah, the big guys. Well,
Can I make a
yeah.
comment? So there was, the comment was made like, oh, I mentioned Bob, but I didn't mention him dancing with anyone else. And there's a good reason for that. His partner dancing in this isn't exceptional. Like he doesn't, some of the other films that we have watched, other dancers, they dance to the level of their partner so that they match. Like was just being discussed, those two make an excellent team because they match each other. If we watch this film again, I think you'll see that Bob Fosse's dancing doesn't match the other dancers most of the time. He's so extra so much of the time that it's a distraction. I mean, it's great, but there's not the same kind of teamwork and synergy as a group.
So Bridget, maybe that's one reason why Bob Fosse was destined to be a choreographer, because the style was so idiosyncratic from the very beginning.
I agree.
Maybe less so with Gower. I don't know how you guys feel about that, because, I mean, both of them went on to achieve their greatest success on Broadway, and both of them were both directors and choreographers who influenced just about everybody in one way or another. But Fosse's film career is kind of interesting. Do you guys know? I mean, somebody remind us of Fosse's amazing entrance in Kiss Me, Kate. Bring back that memory, Arthur or anybody.
Well, he flew in, I think, and then did a split across the stage.
Yeah.
Wasn't he the one who did the split? Not just the split, and I don't know how he survived. Or could have made children after that split, but he split and slid across the whole stage. I haven't seen it in a long time, but it is he flew in, split, and just stayed split across the stage. That's what I remember.
Yeah, and I know for a fact that he choreographed that himself. So, from his beginnings as a film performer, the idiosyncratic Bob Fosse was visible to us. He just had a signature, and it was going to be unlike everybody else's.
I think John wants to speak.
Thanks, Arthur. Am I remembering right from your intro that Gower Champion choreographed the movie?
Gower Champion did co-choreograph the movie with Stanley Donen, yes. But I would bet you he didn't touch Bob Fosse's dancing. I don't know that for sure, but I don't think Bob Fosse let anybody touch his dancing ever.
I did read that Bob Fosse did his own choreography.
Oh, you did read that, Herb? Is that Herb?
Arnold.
Oh, Arnold. He did do his own choreography. Yeah, okay. Not surprised.
Well,
by the way, Arnold, I'll answer your email tomorrow. Sorry, I've been tardy. So we've got Gower Champion and Bob Fosse not only singing and dancing, but also in speaking roles. Anything strike you about the actual acting that they do in this movie?
Well, some of them act. Helen Wood was wooden in her acting. Great dancing, but not much in terms of acting. About Debbie Reynolds, and I thought Bob Fosse did very credible jobs of acting.
I do too, Arnold. I absolutely agree with you.
Me too.
With Bob Fosse, there's a real character there. And, even though this is sort of a backstage cliche story about Broadway, I want to talk a little bit about that later, but I think Bob Fosse's portrait of a production assistant. That's really what he's doing. He's playing a gopher. I think there are wonderful details in that. Even, I mean, the way he runs into the theater, tossing food to everybody. I don't know if you guys have ever seen production assistants in action, but I mean, he nails it. He nails what those kids do. I think it's really a credible performance from somebody who never became known as an actor per se.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to that. I was just shocked how good it was. Like he was his character development was so detailed. And maybe this is because he's a dancer and a choreographer. Every movement he made was so well thought out, and it was so part of his character that it was just awesome.
Yeah, I think so too. So details in acting in addition to the dancing. I interviewed Donna McKechnie one time, who of course became a star through Chorus Line. And she was talking to me about doing, I think her first show on Broadway was How to Succeed. And that was choreographed by Bob Fosse. And she said that they once spent a whole day agreeing on how they were going to move their little fingers. and that's Bob Fosse to a T. Was somebody speaking there? Yes, no?
Can I respond to, John wrote a comment in the chat that I just want to respond to. I did not see Fosse as being lying and conniving. I thought I saw him as being innocent and naive,
yeah,
and always hopeful that he was really going to be able to pull this off.
Yeah, yeah.
Reading in the character.
Yeah,
that worked the first time. After that, after he saw that he didn't get to make the decisions, after the second and third time, no, he wasn't just being.
I think he continued to believe that he was going to pull this off. He might be deluded, but I don't think he was lying.
Yeah, definitely. But the innocence is so charming, isn't it? Yeah. Leandra, I shouldn't be calling on people. That's you.
I can't get a word in. It's moving so quickly. I saw Arthur's hand, and then I see Bruce.
I thought that was a weakness of the script. And that was Goodrich, right?
Francis Goodrich and Albert Hackett, yeah.
Right, who were a married couple.
Yes.
And who did great work, but having him come back to the well again and again was not Fosse's weakness, it was the script's weakness. How many times is he going to say, you got the part, and she didn't get the part, or you're going to get the part, and she's not going to get the part, or I promise, and it just was a slapdash device from the authors, from the script.
I must be such a pushover, Arthur, because I love that about the character. I think in addition to the character's innocence, he's a dreamer by nature, and he can deceive himself so easily and just believe the most ludicrous things. So I don't see it as a flaw in the screenplay. I think it's a lovely little touch that works with the character as a whole, but that's okay. We can agree to disagree. And John is disagreeing with me too, so.
All right, Bruce.
2 against 1. So how about this as a film that purports to give us a picture of Broadway in the early 1950s? I mean, we don't need to list the cliches that are in this film because they're innumerable, but were there any things in the film that struck you as sort of true about sort of giving us the world of the theater in 1953?
Hey, Bill, Bruce was going to actually happen before.
Oh, I'm sorry,
and
Bruce.
Then Len and Chris had their.
Okay, I'll shut up. Go ahead, Bruce.
That's okay. I'm generally not a big dance person, and could you musician? Yeah. And I found that the dancing was very interesting to me in this one. I loved the dance on the roof. Even Kurt Kasner, who is not built for dancing, was not built for
They
dancing.
worked around him, didn't they?
Yeah, they worked him in, and it worked. But my favorite thing were the two dances that Fosse and Reynolds did together, because it turns out, I looked this one up, the backward dance where they're unpopping the balloons and all that
Yeah.
is the exact same steps as they used in the other dance where he ends up falling into the river,
Oh,
and they just played it backwards.
wow. I didn't notice
He
that.
didn't have to choreograph a second set of dancing for them, which they had to, of course, film going forward and then just play the film backward. But it's the exact same steps.
Very good. Did you notice that, Bridget? That escaped me.
No, I did notice that the scene with the balloons was like backwards and then forwards, and obviously the steps were the same then, but I did not notice that they were the same as the one in the park by the river.
Yeah, me either.
So I totally missed that. Thank you for that. I do want to say the park scene or the river scene, whatever we want to call it, is a really good example of where Bob Fosse was so extra, he made his partner look flat. And I don't think that was doing a good service to the film. I think that it was to the film's detriment that he made her look flat, where she is not a flat dancer. She's a very accomplished dancer.
Interesting. Okay. I didn't notice that either. Well, but maybe the point is, somebody said earlier that they couldn't take their eyes off Bob Fosse, and I couldn't either. So I guess Debbie Reynolds got short shrift from me. Leandra, who else had a hand up that I missed?
Yeah, Len and Chris, and then Arthur has his hand up.
I
Okay.
had a question, and maybe smarter people than me can comment on it, but I really got a kick out of watching the show dance, the final dance, the final show.
Yeah.
Particularly, I was trying to figure out the special effects method there, but sometimes the snow was going up, sometimes it was going down.
Snow dance, not the show.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
And then he was going backwards. They were jumping up 2 or 3 steps backwards. Were they running the film backwards, or how? I thought it was very entertaining and unique.
That it was. So you had Arthur's hand up, Leandra, was that it?
Well, I can answer that question. Yes, they did run the film backwards, and her skirt is the giveaway. If you watch her skirt, you can tell.
Yes. And then
So then we had Arthur?
Yeah. First, Kurt Kasner, and I said in an email to Bill, Kurt Kasner gives us all hope that we can be in a musical. And the park scene in this show is very similar in the set to the scene in the movie Bells Are Ringing, where Just in Time is on. That reminded me very much of that. And Bill, you said that at some point you would let someone talk about what happened to Helen Wood.
Yeah, I not much, right?
Well, it was quite a scandal, or quite a story. Helen Wood, and I looked at a number of sites. She was the lead dancer at Radio City in the Rockettes. And then she was a single mother. She did a couple of porn loops and then accepted $750 and a trip to Miami and did a movie that she thought would allow her to keep, keep going and open. Ultimately, her goal was to open a dance studio for kids. She thought the movie would disappear. It was Deep Throat.
Oh.
And that ruined her ability. She did it under another name, but ruined her ability to open the dance studio for kids. And she continued life until I think the young 60s.
Wow.
As a waitress. So she continued as a waitress. So and I couldn't find her in any other shows.
Yeah.
But that was the reason.
My goodness. Thank you for the research. Kurt Kasner, I think Kurt Kasner is terrific. And when I looked him up today, I didn't realize he made 11 musicals. 11. And you all have him, though you may not know him by name, or maybe you do. You all have him on an original Broadway cast recording. Arthur, you're not allowed to answer this. Anybody know in what Broadway musical he played a featured role? Oh no, Bruce, you can't.
The Sound of Music.
Yeah, okay, Carol, you got it.
Sorry.
Yeah, he played Max, and so he sings "How Can Love Survive" and "No Way to Stop It," two of my favorite songs in that score, actually, and he does them beautifully.
Which they took out of the movie.
Yeah, and they were cut from the movie. I know.
Yeah.
But he's delightful, and you're right, Arthur. He gives us all hope that we could be there as well. But he's got real dimension, you know. He really can kind of almost do anything in his own way, and I love the way Nothing's Impossible, the choreography is worked around him, and so skillfully, and he comes off fine in it, you know. It's really neat. Do we have any other hands, Leandra? Because I want to go back to my who?
Cynthia?
Oh, Cynthia.
You're muted, Cynthia. It's like she kept
You asked if anything was realistic about 50s or mid 50s Broadway or whatever. I think it's probably always true that there's politicking, that sometimes it isn't the best person, it's what who you know or where you get influence. And you see that with all three guys. By the way, I love the triplet part of it. You know, usually we have when a star is born kind of movie, which of course this was, you have at least two contenders for the one role at the end. And I got a kick out of the fact that it expanded to three.
Yeah.
So that was fun. And by the way, I thought some of the lyrics were delightful, very funny, and, you know, well done.
Yeah, well, it's Ira Gershwin, for heaven's sake. So, yeah, I agree with you about sort of the world of the theater that in some ways never changes. Any other details about sort of how they create that world in this movie in a way that seems believable to you?
Other details.
Arnold? Yeah.
I would say what was unbelievable to me was that just because the star was leaving the show, we have to rewrite every musical number. It made for a great scene of dancing and singing on top of a piano, but I don't think that would ordinarily happen, and they wouldn't do it in 3 weeks either.
And she learned it the night before. Debbie Reynolds learned all the music the night before because she got it very last night.
Yeah. Well, that alludes to what I said earlier. This movie is filled with cliches.
Yes.
Just filled with them. But, you know, if you're like me, you just suspend disbelief and cliches go away. The thing that strikes me about sort of the world of the theater that they try to create on screen is this, that there's so much energy in this movie. I mean, it's chock full of energy in a way that reminds me how in 1953, musical theater, Broadway musical theater was in the center of our popular culture. You know, that really rings true for me, even in this film, it does. And I think that's commendable. And I've now seen this film 4 times, and I enjoy it every time I see it. You know, hey, Herb Drower, we haven't heard from you tonight at all. I know you're here.
I think he's frozen.
He's frozen?
And he
Yeah,
hasn't
looks like
moved.
it.
He came on. He's lost his connection.
Oh, bummer. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it does look like he's frozen, but Arthur has his hand up, so. we can-
Okay.
Yeah. One thing that rings true, although it was the device sort of fell through, it didn't make sense completely, but the idea of using anything for publicity, and that is David Merrick.
Yeah.
And his, you know, his hiring the finding the
Belly
phone book.
dancer. Oh, the phone book for Subways Are for Sleeping.
Subways Are for Sleeping, and everything that he did was about publicity, and it was about David Merrick. Here it wasn't that way, but the idea, we're going to make lemonade out of lemons and really plug the show rather than a serious attempt to find somebody. I would also, I was struck with how Kurt Kasner, as a body type and as a non-romantic figure, reminded me of Laird Krieger, who was in Heaven Can Wait. I don't know if you remember him.
I don't.
The Don Amici Heaven Can Wait in Paramount. He played the devil, very elegant devil. And he was in a number of movies. You may remember him. I would suggest all of you just look him up. And he had his own tragic story because he wanted to be a romantic lead. He was of a body type like Kurt Kasner, and he lost a lot of weight, and then he decided to have essentially surgery, bariatric surgery, in 1940,
Oh my
whatever
goodness.
it is, 45,
Wow.
and he died from complications of the surgery.
Mhm.
But if you haven't seen Heaven Can Wait, that Lubitsch directed for Paramount with Don Amici and I think Gene Crane, it is a gorgeous movie.
Oh. Huh.
And I don't know, has anyone seen it? Can I ask? Has anyone ever seen that movie? Okay.
Guess not.
No, 2 people did.
Oh, 2 people. Oh, okay.
Barbara and Sandra.
Okay, good. Good. Herb doesn't look frozen to me. Herb, if you can hear us, can you move? So maybe he is frozen. That's too bad. Well, maybe
Just
you
saw
can
Arnold?
reconnect with us, Herb.
Yeah. And
Try
then-
to reconnect with us, okay, using the same link, because we want to hear from you. Yeah, and to your point, Arthur, and this is another thing, I think, another way in which this movie does accurately reflect the Broadway theater in 1953. The role of publicity, theatrical publicity, was immense during that period. And, you know, we have to remind ourselves that in 1953, there were 7 daily newspapers in New York City. So, you know, a press agent could have a field day publicizing stuff that was happening in the theater, and there were columns that would receive all that. I mean, you know, we have social media now, but there was something particularly exciting about seeing stuff in print, in newspapers, and the theater, it was all over the theater back in those days, in papers. Mebby, hello, nice to see you.
I saw a hand from Arnold.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on 2 things. One, Kurt Kasner's character, not the actor, but the character seemed to me to be the Oscar Levant of this movie.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
kind of like filled that second banana to Oscar Levant.
Yeah.
But nobody has mentioned the opening dance sequence.
Oh, it's fantastic.
With all of the different people in different
Yeah.
frames, much like we are all seeing each other tonight on Zoom.
Yeah.
I thought that was just a brilliant construct.
Well, that's where I think we should give credit to Stanley Donen. I mean, that's a directorial conception. And that montage is, several of you have mentioned it to me in the past week. It's really memorable in this film. And, you know, the film
Especially
doesn't
the-
exactly deliver.
Yeah, especially the contortionist woman is
The
extremely-
contortionist woman, I know. And actually, John Steiger said something interesting in the chat. That a generational question. Who recognized the actor who played Wood's husband from television? Do you know what TV series he was in? Obviously, John does. I don't. John, you're going to have to tell us.
Bruce already got it in the chat. He was from the $6 Million Man. He played Oscar. The main sort of, I don't know if he was a spy or government guy that oversaw Lee Majors as the $6 Million Man.
Oh, geez.
Burned into my brain, but only if you watch that show.
Oh, now I see it in the chat. Thank you for that, Bruce. Good. Carol Pred said something very sad. So many popular songs back then were from Broadway. There are hardly any now. Yeah, we've talked about that many times in this series. It's very, very different. So is it just me being totally charmed by the scene with the United Nations in the background? And we can say that Fosse sort of overwhelms Debbie Reynolds in it, but as a routine and as a song, because I think as a song, it's terrific, melodically and certainly in terms of the lyric, it's just my favorite 3 minutes of the movie. Leandra, I think there was a hand or at least some thumbs up there.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Our United State. I thought it was great.
Our United States.
Our United State.
If only we had that in 2023. Oh, well.
Well, and Bill, to your question about how charming the scene was also, it was very interesting to hear that Fosse choreographed himself, because I kept thinking, this is such a Fosse dance with the hat.
It is.
Right?
So Debbie Reynolds really didn't have a chance, did she?
I thought she held her own with it, but I can see other
See
perspectives.
Bridget's point. Yeah, me too. And so Debbie Reynolds, she was only 21 when she did this. And she made 17 movie musicals all the way through The Singing Nun. Anybody remember The Singing Nun? Yeah, how could we forget The Singing Nun?
I see a hand from Bridget.
Good.
I was going to say that all three of the female dancers, you know, the ones who were vying for the role, they were all wonderful. Like each of them had their own style and their own gifts, and everyone could act. And I mean, they were all lovely.
And sorry to jump in on that and to go back to Bill, a question that you started with about Stanley Donen developing. I mean, it was, you know, I think what I think of at least is a very Gene Kelly style. It was all very athletic, other than the rooftop scene. I was really struck by how athletic the dancing was. And Woods, I mean, you could actually see her leg muscles, which I think was very unusual for a female dancer at the time, for them to allow that to be seen.
Good point. Yeah, sure. I'm sure you're right about that. Yeah. Did you notice in the opening credits that Andre Previn and Saul Chaplin are credited for conducting and arranging the music? And that really is notable because Andre Previn, and we know he was a wunderkind, Andre Previn was 24 years old when he worked on this film. And, you know, if we hadn't experienced Leonard Bernstein in our lifetimes, Andre Previn would be right up there. And we'd be thinking of Andre Previn in much the same way that we think about Bernstein, as someone who absolutely crossed over and could do all kinds of music and compose and conduct and arrange and be a personality and all of that stuff, and had great charisma, as Bernstein did. I wonder if Andre Previn ever got bitter because Bernstein did upstage him, but Previn was pretty amazing, very amazing. So no Arthur Freed in this movie to toss gazillions of dollars at it. But what did you think about, did this look like a low budget film to you or not?
Well, it lost $1.5 million, so there must have been some money put into it.
Go for it, Arthur.
Oh,
Then Bridget.
oh, I was going to say, and I forget the name of the singer. Beautiful singer. She did some classical singing that Andre Previn did 3 albums with.
Oh yeah, Sylvia McNair.
Sylvia McNair. They are among the most gorgeous albums that I have. Just beautiful. I recommend that Kern album. His playing is exquisite and her singing is just so beautiful. And that is, to my mind, Andre Previn at his best. That joined her. I don't know how you feel about that, Bill.
Well, I'm going to tell you because I'm going to brag. Sylvia McNair is working on an album for me now, and it's all Harold Arlen. And for me, the album she did with Previn, that's all Harold Arlen, is the finest single collection of Arlen songs by any female vocalist. So I knew Sylvia McNair slightly, and I called her and said, this was a year ago, how would you like to do a whole album of songs by Harold Arlen and Martin Charnin that nobody knows? And her jaw dropped over the phone and she said yes, and it's going to be really stunning. So thank you for bringing that up.
Well, Sylvia McNair, she performed in Baltimore, and my wife and I went to hear her. And it was who was the one with Brecht? It was all Kurt Weill songs.
Oh.
And except for My Ship, it was just terrible. I don't like it. But
on My Ship, she would nail.
Oh, she did. That was the saving grace. We talked to her afterwards. She's had a very rough life.
Yes, she has. She's a cancer survivor.
Yes. She had breast cancer. She had a very ugly divorce.
Yep.
And she was, and I assume is, still delightful with an exquisite sense of music and lyric. And I look forward to your album.
Good. Thank you. It'll be out in September. A couple of you mentioned the songs. You know, there are only 5 songs in this movie. I'm surprised somebody didn't say, because you usually do, well, this doesn't feel like a musical because there are only 4 songs or 5, but this really does, because the songs are beautifully paced within the film, I think. But you heard me say in the introduction that Burton Lane and Ira Gershwin referred to this film as "Give a Song a Break," because they weren't happy with what Donnan did. And in fact, Donnan not only cut 3 of their songs, didn't use them, he had the audacity to edit lyrics by Ira Gershwin. Ira Gershwin. And you know what? I mean, this makes me, since I'm the age that I am, and I get very self-conscious about ageism. Here's the thing. Stanley Donen was 29. Burton Lane was 41. Ira was 57. And I think for Donen to mess around with the score was not a good thing. And I would make the case that part of it was the age difference, and he just went after it. But how'd you feel about the songs in general?
I like them.
Yeah.
I like
I like the way applause is set up, that towards the beginning of the film, when they're rehearsing the claps, and then we get to see it all materialize at the end of the film. Yeah, Lynn agrees.
Yeah, and nothing's impossible.
Nothing's impossible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to tell you a story about Burton Lane and Ira Gershwin that I think is a cool story that he told me because I had the privilege of knowing him. And Burton Lane is one of the sort of unsung composers for musical theater. And it's because he wrote so little for Broadway, other than On a Clear Day and Finian's Rainbow and a few shows that are forgotten. He did almost all his work in Hollywood. And the Hollywood guys never got the attention that the Broadway people did. But I want to tell you this story. This was the first time that Burton Lane and Ira Gershwin had worked together, and the only time they worked together. And I mean, you know, Burton Lane had written Finian's Rainbow by then and a whole bunch of other great film stuff. How About You, sung by Mickey and Judy, for example. And Ira Gershwin was Ira Gershwin in 1953. But this is the thing that is funny, or fun anyway. They were going to do the score together, and they got together to begin work. And they knew each other because Burton Lane was a Gershwin protege. And Burton Lane used to go to the Gershwin home on Sundays as a teenager and play four-handed piano with George Gershwin, which is just delicious. But the capper is, despite the fact that Lane and Gershwin had known each other for so long, when they got together to work, they were both very nervous, and they discovered soon that each of them had brought a tranquilizer. Can you imagine? You know, guys who had done such great work being insecure. And isn't that the plight of any of us who call ourselves artists? I think so. Oh, I think there's a hand, isn't there, Leon?
There's a couple, yeah. Carol, Pred, and then Arthur.
I just had a question. I wondered if you knew what the cut songs were and if they were ever in anything else.
I do, and I'm going to quote from one of them when we get to our miscellany in a few minutes. Yeah.
Are they songs we would know?
No, not at all. And none of these songs became popular either. And Arnold, you mentioned that this film lost $1.5 million, which I didn't realize. Anybody have any ideas why this film did not succeed at the box office? We've talked about some flaws, but I mean, for an MGM movie musical, though it didn't have any major stars at that time, for an MGM musical to lose money was very unusual. Anybody have any ideas?
So what I read was that it was, by the time it came out, you know, Singin' in the Rain had come out and others had come out, and this was just seen as an old style musical. It was more dance driven than it was, and singing driven, or primarily dance driven. Not much of a plot, not much character development, and so it was just kind of seen as old hat. Mrs. Gershwin, Ira's wife, was quoted as saying after she saw the rushes of it, she said, "If you own stock in MGM, sell it." And that I think was probably representative of why this was not going to make it.
And the capper, Arnold, just in case you don't know this PS, the Gershwins did sell their stock in MGM after this movie came out.
I haven't thought about that.
Yeah, go.
So, and so I'm really glad that you mentioned the timing of it and what else was out around that same time, because, you know, I mean, the movie was enjoyable. Don't get me wrong. Like, I have criticisms, but I did enjoy the experience of it and it was fun. But what struck me about it is there was an inconsistency in the energy. Sorry, my phone dinged. So like if you take a film like Singin' in the Rain, for example, the energy between actors is consistent. So from like scene to scene, there's more consistency. There's also consistency from actor to actor. So they're meeting each other's levels, both in the way that they respond in acting and the way they dance with each other. And what I noticed in this film is there's a lot of inconsistency in energy. So there are scenes where actors are not matching each other's energy. Some of that scene in the dancing as well, and it's inconsistent from scene to scene. So I just noticed that it lacks a little refinement in that area.
That's good. And that, I think we have to pin some blame anyway on Stanley Donen, who was still obviously learning, because maintaining a consistent style is one of the things that a director needs to be responsible for. And I agree with you. The movie falls short in that regard. Yeah. But I don't think the movie looks cheap. Do you guys? I don't think it looks cheap. It just looks modest.
I thought the painted backdrops were pretty cheap.
Oh, for the United Nations, you didn't go for that?
Go ahead, Arthur.
I want to go back to Lane and say that My Shining Hour is one of the most perfectly crafted songs I've ever heard, which Lane did.
No, but I'm sorry to correct you, but I have to. That's a Harold Arlen, Johnny Mercer song.
Oh, it's an Arlen song?
Arlen and Mercer. Yeah.
I am wrong then.
That's okay. That's okay. We all make mistakes in this group from time to time, and we're also capable of brilliance in this group. So,
and but I have to say that the music for On a Clear Day, which he did do,
yes,
has some of the most outstanding dramatic songs. She Wasn't You is one of the great songs. Just passionate. I mean, it's sung by a man who's a real SOB, and you find that out, but what a song. Bridget, this is at least the second time where we don't see your face. You had an excuse last time.
Yeah, I had a doctor's appointment too late today and some other stuff. So I'm not even like, I'm on my phone. I'm home now, but I was a person in transition before, not in front of my computer.
Okay, well, next time.
I hope so. Got to get my life together.
Right, so that we have some confidence that you're not a manufactured by AI.
Correct.
And following up on what Bill said about the golden age, that we are not centered around Broadway anymore. I think that's over, but I'm struck with how many young people, particularly in high schools and grade schools, colleges even, are drawn to the musicals of the golden age. I think the canon is closed, but it still has power. I mean, even Oklahoma, people come back to it again and again and again. Mary Rogers, Once Upon a Mattress, again and again. Stephen Schwartz is probably the only one now who produces musicals that the high schools and want to do, but it will, even though the canon's closed, I think they'll last.
Don't forget Music Man.
No, we won't forget Music Man, that's for sure. Carol Pred notes that Ella Fitzgerald did albums by a few different composers, and Bruce Amsel reminds us that Ella Fitzgerald recorded an album of Harold Arlen. That's true. Just to my taste, Bruce, Sylvia McNair's album is superior when it comes to Arlen, but that's just my taste. That's all. I mean, you probably know that Ella did a whole series of songbook albums that were quite famous and sold gazillions of copies. Splendidly done, produced by Norman Granz at Verve during a really golden period. I think, yeah, we're just about ready to move into miscellany unless anybody has anything even halfway brilliant to say. No? Do we? Okay, miscellany. There are 4 pieces. And the first is to tell you what the next movie is. The next movie was to have starred Fred Astaire and Judy Garland, but it was in another bad period for Judy, and she wound up not making it. And so the star cast instead was Ginger Rogers. So you probably know I'm talking about the Barclays of Broadway from 1949, the film that reunited Fred and Ginger, wound up reuniting them after about 9 years. And it's really got some cool stuff in it, and it has a Comden and Green screenplay. So by all means, take a fresh look at it, or a new, or introduce yourself to it for the first time. We're going to change the routine a little because it was pointed out to me that we're running into Passover. So the film night for April will be Thursday, April 13. It'll be delayed by a week, April 13. And we have Barbara Witkowski with us tonight, and I bet she would just love to tell us about making contributions to the Musical Theater Project.
That's my job tonight, is to tell you all to please contribute to the Musical Theater Project. Your support means so much to us here, but more importantly, I want to say thank you. I recognize so many faces here, and you're really our family. Bill said something wonderful this week that I have to share, and it's the music and lyrics of classical American musical theater embody a way of looking at the world that is uncommon today. You are truly an uncommonly wonderful group of people. We're happy to have you here tonight and very, very delighted by your support. Thank you.
Thanks, Barb. That was great to hear. Appreciate it. Number 3, speaking of, if you'll pardon the expression, money, I hope it's okay with you guys that we've been running into more films that have asked you to pay rental fees through YouTube rather than just getting them free. You know, we show some stuff that is pretty rarely seen these days. So that's why sometimes the rental is attached to it. I love it when we have a film that you can just get without paying for it, but at least these rentals are not like going to a movie theater. We know what it costs to go to a movie nowadays, and this is such a bargain. So I hope that's okay. If you really, if it's troubling any of you, send me an email, and I would like to hear from you. But we're gonna keep those rentals coming from time to time if that's the only way you can see the film. Okay. Miscellany 4. I said I was going to share with you a lyric by Ira Gershwin. The music is by Burton Lane, and this is one of the cut songs from Give a Girl a Break, one of the 3 cut songs that Stanley Donen was responsible for eliminating. This would have been used in the show within a show, and the title of it is Ach du lieber Papa. You know, only Ira Gershwin would have done this, and it goes on for a while, but I'm just going to share with you one chorus that goes like this. Ach du lieber Papa, then the band commences. Ach du lieber Papa makes you lose the senses. We keep standing all day, handing you the polkas and the marches, notwithstanding, we got fallen arches. Ach du lieber Papa fills you full of cheer, but by now we played enough. Ja, we have stayed enough before you see thee made enough to buy a beer. Oh, too bad that didn't get filmed. So, but I have a recording of Ira Gershwin and Burton Lane singing that. If anybody wants it, let me know. I guess that's it for tonight. And thank you for investing your time and your brain cells and your heart in this modest little grade B movie musical that now you will probably never see again. Thanks for being with us, and we will move on to the diehards. Bye, bye, bye.